You may have seen numerous FNAF timelines, the analysis of tiny hidden mysteries, the reveals within pages upon pages of books, but you're yet to learn of the most important thing in this entire franchise, the business. That's right, today we're going to be trying the impossible, making a video about a fictional business entertaining and worth watching. So allow me to tell you everything you can possibly know and uncover the business of Fazbear Entertainment. Before we begin to specifically dive into the businesses within FNAF, we need to first discuss how real-life businesses work and what certain words I'll be throwing around mean. First of all, the parent company, which in this case is Fazbear Entertainment, is what owns and has the rights to absolutely everything, such as all subsidiaries and establishments attached to it. Subsidiaries are simply independent companies that are a part of or owned by the parent company. For example, Droid, which you should be subscribed to, is the parent company, while Hyperfied Droid, my second channel, which may or may not have videos coming to it very soon, is a subsidiary to it and a distinct legal entity. But how exactly is the businesses we see in FNAF specifically run? First of all, let's lay out the basics, starting with the parent company Fazbear Entertainment. The company was founded by William Afton and Henry Emily and started as an incorporated company, Inc. for short, although after the FNAF 6 fire, the company dissolves, meaning that the company ceases to legally exist. However, someone, you can argue who, revives the company as a limited liability company, LLC for short, and continues the Fazbear brand. In fact, turns it into a mega corporation, which we'll get into later. But to explain how everything else fits in, I think the best way to do this is by going through the story from the business's perspective while adding some notes here and there. So, let's begin. We all know the company's first move was creating the Fredbear's Family Diner establishment, with the Fredbear and Spring Bonnie characters attached to said establishment. And after some amount of success, they created a new establishment called Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, which is when they truly started to turn into a mega corporation with multiple business assets, creating a television show with their characters, with Fredbear as the main character and the Freddy characters as side characters. They also make toys and plushies for both establishments, and by 1983 they had also begun running a full fest yearly that we see in Help Wanted. They also might have started some sort of Fazbear food and drink subsidiary as they begin to sell a whole bunch of items that we see in Help Wanted and Security Breach, such as the Freddy Fudge Bar, Bonnie Bites, Lemon Chica Bar, Chica of the Sea, Chica Chug, Pirate Plunder Bar, Buccaneer Bounty, and Foxy Cove Cooler. The business was already seemingly successful and growing at a rapid rate. But when the infamous bite of 83 occurred, it all started to go downhill, and they begun turning into the dodgy business we all know far too well. After quickly shutting down Fredbear's Family Diner to avoid the bad press, they separated themselves from it as much as they could, changing the television program from Fredbear and Friends into simply Freddy and Friends, that we learn about coming up to the release of Security Breach. They were struggling to stay above the bad press either way, but were able to continue running the business with a Freddy's location until the missing children incident occurred. And 2 strikes were enough for the public as the business struggled to get anyone back into the establishments after this, stopping the business in its tracks. A couple years later, the company decides to open a new and improved Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, with brand new toy animatronics based on some old characters but also adding some new faces to the roster, while the original animatronics are now withered and left in parts and service. Much like their first locations, they sell masks, toys, and plushies which we see in multiple games. Although unfortunately for them, the location only remains open for about a week or so, as another missing children's incident occurs in their doors and police investigations start. To add insult to injury, as they host their last birthday party for the establishment, one of their animatronics bite their own day shift guard's frontal lobe, causing the infamous bite of 87. In their public statement about the closure, they explain how they're gonna scrap the toy animatronics and reopen one day, with the original characters on a much smaller budget. They stick to that promise and open a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location with the original 4 animatronics, which stays open as long as they can keep it operational, which unfortunately for them, they've been on a downward spiral for years now and aren't able to keep it going. And so after exactly a decade of unfortunate events, they finally admit defeat and stop Freddy Fazbear's Pizza operations for good. However, 30 years later, there's one final attempt by Phone Dude at Fazbear Entertainment to milk the company dry by creating a small local attraction, Fazbear's Fright, based purely on the myths and rumors of Freddy's past. They even give the night guards a logbook based on the Freddy's location, which once the location burns down by unknown causes, Michael, they sell anything remaining from the fire, like the logbook, at a public auction. Although before we head to the next establishment with Freddy as the face of the franchise, we need to talk about Fazbear's extended family, starting with Fazbear Entertainment's new subsidiary, Afton Robotics LLC. That's right, Afton Robotics is not an independent company outside of Fazbear's, but it's directly connected to it and under its wing. What got me thinking about this was the fact that timeline-wise, it's always been so weird that Afton basically left business with Fazbear's and just made his own stuff, while his business was already booming with success. But then I started looking at Pizzeria Simulator and Help Wanted, and remembered that the fun times are present and are used under the Fazbear name, even characters like Lolbit. Even the character encyclopedia doubles down that Afton Robotics is a part of the Fazbear empire, and not an entirely separate business. So with the subsidiary Afton Robotics, William makes the main funtime animatronics we see in sister location, with Circus Baby as the headliner for the new establishment, Circus Baby's Pizza World. Unfortunately, on one of their testing days for the establishment, Elizabeth Afton dies by the hands of Baby. So William announces to the public that the establishment has been cancelled due to gas leaks in the location in order to downplay the situation. William takes the funtimes out of the location as we read about in the announcement, and he places them in his underground facility where he created them. Sometime later, he opens up Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rentals, with the original funtime lineup while also having Chica's Party World as either its own establishment or possibly just a rental package that only contains Funtime Chica, Music Man, and Lolbit. Although due to it being a client for entertainment and rentals, my guess is that it's a separate establishment that's just borrowing and using their animatronics, which explains why none of them can be found or are underground at the time of sister location. They're above ground being used at another establishment. Moving on to more pre-FNAF 6 locations, we have another establishment under Fazbear Entertainment called El Chip's Fiesta Buffet, containing El Chip and selling El Chip's tortilla chips. We know these are under Fazbear's copyright because Freddy is used in one of their advertisements, which would be a copyright issue for another company to use Freddy. And El Chip is used a lot later in the franchise too. Besides this, there also seemed to have been a location that the Mediocre Melodies came from, that we hear about in the Fazbear Fright story, The Puppet Carver. But either way, they are under Fazbear property considering they are used in future establishments, much like El Chip. Now we fully arrive at the next fully Fazbear owned establishment, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place, owned specifically by Henry Emily and run by Michael Afton. We also know that Fazbear's owns literally every animatronic and item in the catalogue, since the rockstars not only include Fazbear copyrighted names like Freddy, Bonnie, Chica and Foxy, but they came alongside Lefty, who was made by Henry himself. We also know that Fazbear's buys out Edwin's company from the Tales from the Pizzaplex books, which contains Mr. Hugs and therefore most likely the rest of the trash in the gang too. And with El Chip and the Mediocre Melodies also being a part of the Fazbear brand too, and the security puppet obviously being a part of it as well, we can safely say that Fazbear Entertainment 100% owns everything in that catalogue. We also know that Fazbear's has its own legal subsidiary called Fazbear Enterprises, dealing with contracts etc. that we read about in the Tales from the Pizzaplex stories. Attached to this subsidiary is the Frederick & Sons law firm that we read about in the FNAF AR emails, and works perfectly fine as the one that we possibly use with Helpy in FNAF 6 too. Although unfortunately, here's when Fazbear Entertainment Incorporated dissolves, and is revived by someone sometime into Fazbear Entertainment LLC, which here is when Fazbear's turns into a mega corporation. Here's when Fazbear Entertainment most likely creates a subsidiary for Fazbear Delivery Services, containing the Fazbear Frights location, Fazbear Entertainment Distribution Center, the Fazbear Funtime service that is FNAF AR, Fazbear Express, which is the shipping company found from the QR codes that appear on boxes in the prize counter in Help Wanted, DLZ Shipping Solutions that we read about in the FNAF AR emails, Friendly Faces Services also from the Fazbear Frights, and finally the virtual ordering system from Security Breach would probably count as part of that subsidiary too. Either way, there's a weird amount of shipping services in FNAF that honestly are all kind of interchangeable. Although we can kind of just guess that the subsidiary itself is probably what's called Fazbear Express, instead of that being another shipping service, and that the Funtime service deals with the AR stuff, while DLZ Shipping Solutions deals with Help Wanted and Security Breach stuff. Speaking of, sometime around here is when Fazbear Entertainment creates Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted, in partnership with Silver Parasol Games, based on the in-universe FNAF indie games created by Steve Snodgrass, who was contracted by Fazbear's to do so. Within this game, we see that Fazbear's are still selling a bucket load of merchandise too. So with the upward success and popularity that Fazbear's began to get with their animatronic services, merchandise, and the video game, they put all their money into creating a brand new establishment called Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex. They obviously own every location, attraction, and establishment within the Pizzaplex, as well as running quarterly Faz Life magazines for the Pizzaplex, and selling a multitude of food and drinks made just for the establishment, such as Moondrop, Sunny Drop, Fizzy Faz, and Sodaroni. Throughout Security Breach, we learn of a lot of other Fazbear subsidiaries, because at this time, Fazbear Entertainment is now a mega corporation. Everything I'm about to mention goes under the Fazbear Corporation / FazCorp subsidiary, which under that not only do they own Freddy Water Company, but also Fazbear Construction, Fazbear Clean Team, Helpy Hand Medical, and Talk and Toil. That's right, Fazbear Entertainment not only makes video games, establishments like an entire mall, but they also deal with all the construction, cleaning, medical, fueling, and water/sewage. They have literally every possible thing that they could under their name to deal with any and all issues and create anything they want. Finally, for completion's sakes, I'm going to go through the rest of the Fazbear owned food and drinks, which this is why I think there's a separate subsidiary for food and drinks instead of just being attached to the establishments alone. Because there's a lot here, like disappointment chips, meat bites, allergy friendly mixed nuts, Butter for One, Faz Bar, Teethy Chew, Chewy Treat, Fazzies, Eat and Cry, Cat's Black Licorice, Bite Late Night, Crudelet, Coblins, Devilish Delights, Lavender Dollop, Third Eye, Squirmy, Sloppy, and Exotic Beverage. And there's a chance Fazbear Entertainment owns the rights to Filamenco and Datasaur, the technologies that they use and we see in Help Wanted and Security Breach. So there we go, literally everything that Fazbear Entertainment owns and all you need to know about what's now a mega corporation, minus some Fazbear frights and tales from the Pizzaplex stuff, which equally could or couldn't be attached to Fazbear's, and might all just be random stuff. But I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you next week.